and put themselves into that kind of uncomfortable zone of trying to do something unique for themselves and grow a brand. I guess take that change on and actually see that as a positive and quite a progressive thing, because nothing is constant, everything's changing. And it's actually about your reaction and behaviours to that change.
Coming up to 6 now, a little cavapoo, but you're absolutely right. He's present all the time. And that really taught me as I was walking with him that actually that really is good for me to have something that's present with me to be able to create that space.
Yeah, just trying to understand what behaviours and reactions you have to different actions as well. So having that self-awareness, I think, is really important. Taking on board that feedback is really important. Follow your dreams and ambitions, relentlessly, and chase them, with passion and enthusiasm.
Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Ben Dando has joined me in the studio today. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm delighted to be here, so thank you.
I'm looking forward to hearing about your journey and your story. Before we do that, the audience always likes to hear a little bit about who you are and where your focus is right now.
I work for a company called Liquid Death, which is a global beverage company, healthy beverage company. I'm actually the managing director of the business, and I run the international side of the company. So my role primarily is around international expansion and taking our brand into new markets and new regions and everything that entails in order to grow the brand and the business. So that's me. That's what I do. Thoroughly enjoy what I do, and I'm excited to be able to talk to the listeners about the journey and how I've got to this point. And hopefully there'll be some good learnings in there for everyone.
Excellent. And you've done what all my guests do, and my audience always likes me to then follow up with, we always have this professional side of us that we tend to present, and that's absolutely the way it should be. Just tell us a bit more about your personal life. So when you're not working, what is it you spend your time investing in?
Yeah, cool. So my personal life, I was always an athlete, or attempted to be an athlete. So from a young age, lots of sport, lots of being outside. So I'd say sort of my primary passion is probably not being behind a screen or a desk. It's actually being out there in fresh air, enjoying the nature environment and things like that. So, and certainly sports. Played a lot of field hockey growing up and played that at an international standard for quite a long period of time, which is where I guess I've drawn some of my leadership principles from in the past and what I currently use. And then nowadays, I enjoy spending time with my family, my children. I enjoy surfing and outdoors, hiking, walking, cycling, that sort of stuff. So just try and keep as active as possible and injury-free at my age, if possible, too.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing later how you weave all of that personal side in, which obviously gives us the energy to do what we do in business later on. So thanks for that. So let's start then at the start in the sense of the journey. So what a lot of our listeners, again, really love about this podcast is it's about understanding those early formative years. What was it about that environment, that early system that you were exposed to that maybe informed your early leadership style?
I think it started with me with sport, honestly, being in a team environment and various sports and learning how to create high-performing teams through that sporting nature. So started at quite a young age. I think probably the first time I'd led a team, I was probably around about the age of 10, and it was just captaining the local football team. And a lot of that was about leading by example, being the best that you could be, and then taking the team with you. I guess as those years went on, like I said, I played field hockey internationally for a number of years, and that was actually very high performance, quite high pressure, quite intense, and a lot of it was quite scrutinised. So it was about how could you get your body to perform at the best level that you could, but with an environment and with a team that you're all trying to achieve the same objective, but you've all got different strengths in order to achieve, that overall objective, whether it's winning the league, a European Championship, a World Cup, whatever it could be. It was working on some of those principles. And I'd say that for myself and some of my leadership style and some of the lessons that I've learned, those early informative years, I draw on sports quite heavily and that sporting environment in order to build high-performing teams and deliver results. So, and I can talk a little bit more about that, but I'd say that's definitely a core of who I am and what I do as well.
Sure. So we'll definitely come back to that and how it's been a thread during your career and obviously continues to be. I'm really curious as well about pre-10-year-old, because you know that first team that you led as captain, not everyone in that team would have stepped up and said, I want to be captain of the team. So what was it, something about you and who you were early on in life, even before 10, that meant that you stepped into that role and obviously found it something that you could do?
Yeah, I think my mum would call me fiercely independent. And I think that's probably a little bit more kind of nature rather than nurture. So I'd say that there's always been something inside me that's been independent, wanted to lead from the front, always quite happy to take risks, enjoy leading, team members, people, whoever it could be. So I'd say that a lot of that probably comes from the core of who I am. And then obviously some personal experiences, my dad left when I was 6. So at that point, my mum, who is one of my best friends and absolutely incredible, and without a shadow of doubt, I would not be where I am today without her. She's a very inspirational lady. That she was working full time. I was then obviously looking after 3 children. Not an easy job, but my nan actually, who recently passed away, also an incredibly inspirational lady. So been very fortunate to have great leaders, but inspirational female leaders around me in my life. And then that independence from a young age, I think, has just made me grow into, I think, probably the leader that I am from a young age. So,
yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And again, we'll maybe come back to that about where that's worked for you during your career and where sometimes that might go against us when we've got that first independent nature and how we manage that. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. So talk about those early years in terms of your 20s and 30s. How did the leadership develop then in terms of a business context?
Yeah, so I think I got to a point where I realised that I wasn't going to become an international athlete, and actually I needed to build a career alongside trying to follow my passion and purpose, or what I felt was my purpose in life at that point. And I was given an opportunity. Actually, my very first role was working for Red Bull as an on-premise sales rep. So looking after all the bars, clubs in the southwest of the UK. Fantastic brand, great role. Really, really enjoyed it. And from that and through sport, there was a lot of synergies between like Coca-Cola and sport. And I knew someone at Coca-Cola at the time. We were doing some work through sport, and they were working on a brand called Relentless, which was an energy drink at the time. And this particular individual said to me, "Hey Ben, why don't you come across on this leadership program within?" They were called Coca-Cola Enterprises at the time, and that gave me the opportunity and grounding to work in a range of different departments. So, brand, shopper marketing, people leadership, commercial roles. So it started to give me, and I was there for about 5 years, but it gave me a really broad development platform with some quite substantial kind of blue chip training. Now I am probably the least blue chip guy out there now, but what it did do is it gave me the foundations and the skill set and the learning and the platform in order to kind of take some of that into what has been my career and how it's progressed to more entrepreneurial roles and businesses as time have gone on. And I think that probably suits me way more. I'd say I'm way more entrepreneurial at heart, and probably some of that comes through from being fiercely independent, being happy to make decisions, taking calculated risks, and delivering results, and being quite happy being held accountable to that, rather than being part of a massive system where you look after a very small piece within a massive system. And there are lots of people that do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. I just know that fit wasn't right for me. But what I did get, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity that I was given, was a really solid grounding and a really good foundation to build from.
And I remember it was Branson, I think, who said recently on LinkedIn, I think it was, in a wider piece he was doing, that he's convinced that we're all born as preneurs, he calls it, whether we're intrapreneur or entrepreneur or whatever preneur you want. And then our environment then shapes whether we move into that earlier or later in our lives. What's your view on that? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think that everybody has the ability to go and do something unique, for sure. I think one of the biggest things is people's risk appetite and current circumstances. And equally, I talk a lot actually to my children about access and opportunities. So I'm very fortunate that I've been able to provide some amazing access to different sports, schools, facilities, to my children. And that's been passed down through generations, and, have worked very hard before me in order to be able to allow me to have a good educational platform to then learn to grow my career, to then, pass that on. So, very, very fortunate for that. But I think everybody has the ability to, providing they've got access and providing they're given the opportunity to as well. So it then comes about that risk appetite, really, and the drive and determination inside with people. Do they want to go out and put themselves into that kind of uncomfortable zone of trying to do something unique for themselves and grow a brand, in my instance, within the food and beverage category, or whether they choose to actually, do you know what, I want the security of having a role within maybe a bigger business and a role that's quite functional, and I'm happy to do that because of other circumstances, families, friends, they want to travel, they've got other interests that aren't necessarily career, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think everybody's got the ability to, it's just what they choose to.
Good. And let's go back to that system that you were talking about in terms of having great blue chip training, having all of that support around. You could see the future for you in terms of being mapped out as well if you did X, Y, Z, and yet this entrepreneur was within you and you're waiting to obviously bloom in that sense. What can you remember about the feedback you were having back then about the kind of things you needed to change about your leadership style as you were progressing through that bigger system?
Yeah, really good question. So I think the first point I'd say is change is inevitable, and it's really important to, I guess, take that change on and actually see that as a positive and quite a progressive thing, because nothing is constant, everything's changing, and it's actually about your reaction and behaviours to that change. And for me, in those earlier years within my career, it was about trying to learn, honestly. There's just, you think you know and you don't know. So it was about how many different experiences that I could get through the working environment in order to learn. And so I always tried to go into new roles that I hadn't done before, or new courses that I'd not done before. So I was always trying to learn. And as soon as I felt like I was getting stagnant or bored, it was not a good place for me to be. So I tried to then make sure that I was manufacturing moves within the industry that I was in, but in order to stretch myself and learn a bit more. And each time I stretched myself to learn a bit more, and then I got to grasps and with it, I was then going, actually, maybe I've not reached my ceiling here. Maybe I can push myself a little bit further. And so I've probably quite consistently put myself into that uncomfortable zone of not always knowing what I'm going to go and do, but happy to go and give it a go and see if I can figure it out as I'm doing it. And I'd say, for anyone listening to this, I would encourage them to do that as well. Keep learning, whether you're happy within your role or not. And then actually don't be afraid to go and stretch yourself by, I don't know, maybe some people aren't as confident or aren't prepared to, or maybe will doubt themselves. But I would still say, go and do it, go and stretch and challenge yourself. I think it's a really important thing to do. And that's actually where some of the magic happens, when you're outside of your comfort zone and you really do learn and stretch and progress and grow. And it's been very beneficial to me. It's certainly helped me progress my career, which has led to kind of bigger, more broader roles. And perhaps maybe I'll talk you through a little bit more about the career journey if you'd like to know.
Yeah, let's come to that in a moment. I guess one more point for me just to really understand, because people listening to this are hearing this theme around high performance. You had it from the sport perspective, you played at an international level, and sometimes being around that kind of leader can be quite challenging if we don't have the similar mindset. So even though you were seeking opportunities to stretch yourself and you were seeking to learn, I'm just curious again, did you have any unsolicited feedback from people around you about how you need to be aware about how you're impacting others around you? That's what I'm really curious about.
Yeah, totally. Listen, everybody makes mistakes, and I have made my fair share of mistakes as well. And part of that is that learning and getting feedback. So I think early on in my career, I'd quite often seek that feedback. And, I've definitely had the phrases like pulling a china shop or trying to move too quickly. You're moving quicker than some people can actually learn or adapt or change or grow at the same speed. And I'd say in my younger male years, I just wanted to do things really, really quickly. Whether I was trying to take people on that journey or not, it didn't really matter, providing we were delivering the results. Yeah. So I then learned, actually, you can still move at that pace, but you need to adapt with how you are, because my pace will be different to someone else's, and their strengths will be better than my strengths and weaknesses. And so on and so forth. And actually you then try and start building a team that's quite well-rounded with, if you're analytical, go into an analytical role. If you are a communicator, go into a communications-based role. If you're, operations focused and your solutions, is trying to put people into roles that fit them really, really well, and focus on their strengths as well. And I think I've learned that definitely, at points the hard way. And you can upset people through your career if you're trying to, run too quickly or push them too fast or push them outside of their comfort zone. So I think a lot of that comes for me back down to like that self-awareness. So you learn that and you take that feedback on, and then you change and adapt with how you're being. And I think understanding yourself as an individual is really important. What's your purpose? What are some of the goals and ambitions that you're trying to set yourself? What's your leadership style? And, what do you want that to be? And how do you want to be known for your leadership style? I think I always talk to my teams about, what are your strengths, and focus on your strengths. A lot of bigger corporate businesses will be like, what you're not very good at, let's try and make you better at that. I try and do the opposite. I flip it on its head and say, actually, what are you good at? Do more of that, because you're going to enjoy it. You're going to be far more enriched within the role that you're doing than if you're constantly told that you're not good at stuff and you need to become better at it. And then knowing things like your own values, what's your own value set? And then, just trying to understand what behaviors and reactions you have to different actions as well. So having that self-awareness, I think, is really important. Taking on board that feedback is really important. And you're going to get some tough feedback throughout your career, but take it on the chin, learn from it. You don't always have to agree with it. So I always say to my teams, be your own counsel. If I've recommended or suggested something to my team, I'm quite often say, look, be your own counsel, because actually your area better than I do. This is just my observations and my thinking that's adding to your thinking, and then you can make the informed decision because you're the expert within your field. So I don't think it's any bad thing making mistakes. I'd encourage people to do it. I try and encourage people to do it in a kind way, not in a bull in a china shop way, which I've definitely done in the past. And then just adapt and change as you go through your career as well, which I think is really important.
Great. So we're hearing this story about early, background for you and environment being really exposed to that high performance culture, which then stayed with you and stayed through your career as well. And also that ability to be uncomfortable, seeking those new opportunities, and then gaining feedback and becoming aware about how you need to change. So as you say, take us through the next stage of the career so we can learn about that part of the journey.
Yeah, so I started to go down in business size. So rather than working at the big blue chip corporates, I moved to, it was still pretty big at the time, Danone, which is the world's biggest B corporation. I then moved to Ella's Kitchen, which was the number one category in baby food, brand in baby food. And I looked after UK and international sales at that point. So I started to look at multiple markets, not just one market. And then I realised that actually I really enjoyed smaller businesses where you could move at a faster pace, and actually I wasn't being told to slow down. I was actually being given the reins to accelerate and go quicker, but in a way that was still quite controlled. And then I moved from there into a business called Calafia Farms, which is a US plant-based dairy alternative company. And I set that business up in the UK with a few of my colleagues and honestly, it was one of the most fun things I think I've ever done. It was a really small team. It was a mixture of everything from, setting up an operations and supply chain through to creating a brand strategy and execution plan and, talking to customers. And it was literally all things from effectively like a brand new startup, but was almost like privately backed from a US entity. So really enjoyed that. And I started to find my groove of what I really enjoyed. And I then actually transitioned into my first chief executive role following that one, working for a business called Karma Drinks, which actually won the award for the world's most ethical soft drinks company. And it was probably one of the roles that I learned the most in, how to do things and how not to do things. It was a very challenging period of time, being a CEO through a pandemic. Any CEOs out there that have gone through that, I'd say, it was a very challenging time. Everything that could go wrong was going wrong. It was obviously very tragic period of time for lots of people. And then from a business perspective, we had supply chain challenges, we had new policies, government regulations, we had cost of goods, and inflationary pressures. We had, you name it, it was coming thick and fast at all angles. We had revenue drops in sales. We actually sold a lot through cafes, bars and restaurants, which at the time, as everyone will remember, totally closed down. So it was a period of just, we were changing everything in order to survive as a business whilst trying to be a chief executive, whilst working remotely at home. And then actually that led to an international move. So my family, so my wife and my 3 children, we moved from the UK to New Zealand at that point. went through a capital raise, which actually saved the company at the time, with a view to invest that money to try and rebuild revenue, but from a more stable base and go from non-profitable to profitable, which we ended up doing over a 4-year period of time. We went through an awful amount of change, during that period of time. And I learned a lot about dealing with board of directors, investors. There were different levels of competency. There were different levels of incompetency, communication within the company, different cultures within different businesses. The team that I was leading in New Zealand at the time, we were a very different culture to the team that I was leading, in the UK, and very different behaviours and very different leadership principles in order to generate the best results from those two different teams as well. And we delivered the results over that 4-year period of time, but it was one of the most challenging roles I think I've ever done, and one where I learned the most. But equally at the same time, I think towards the end of it, I was so unhappy in my role. I was actually really looking forward to it finishing, which I then learned a brand new thing. I was then learning, actually, rather than just taking a role and being a chief exec and taking money, I was actually, I was like, it's so important not to sacrifice your health for wealth. And it was a really important learning for me, because the mental toll and the well-being toll of being a chief exec, and it's quite a lonely role at times, and the level of stress and pressure, is pretty immense at times as well. And people are looking for you to lead. You haven't got lots of people around you that you can necessarily rely on or share all information with. And it took a real toll on me. It did really take a toll on me. It took a toll on my personal relationships, and it took a toll on my work environment. And then I was learning, actually, I wouldn't sacrifice my health now for any form of wealth or career. I'd try and keep my health and mental health first and foremost, and just make sure that I enjoy my job. And like today, I'm really pleased to say I'm happier than I've ever been within my role. I absolutely love it. I'm at a fantastic company. But my one goal that I had after leaving my previous job was I really wanted to enjoy work again. And I'm so pleased to say that I love what I do now. And that was the number one goal for me. And it lots of lessons that I learned going through that process as well. And then it's also led to other opportunities for me. So I do some strategic board advisory work. I've done some consultancy work. I'm actually a shareholder in a couple of different businesses off the back of it. I set up a distribution company with a very good friend of mine, and that's grown and become very successful as well. So it opened up more and more opportunities for me to learn, grow, stretch capacity, but not at the expense of enjoying what I do, and not at the expense of my own personal health as well. But I learned that one the hard way at times.
Yeah, no, it's a really good lesson, and it's really interesting for those that are listening relating to this, is that I don't think we can underestimate the amplification when you get into the CEO role. And suddenly every decision that you make, everything that you say, everything you don't say, compared to when you were the number 2 or divisional MD or whatever, is just enormous, isn't it? That amplification, particularly if you're going through COVID, where everyone's looking to you in that sense. And it can be very lonely. Just talk to the audience a little bit about, for you, the way you've described it. There's something that happened to you that forced you to think, actually, my health is more important than my wealth. Some out there might be saying, yeah, but surely you would have generated some wealth in the first place for you to be able to almost start saying that. Just talk to us a little bit about why people should maybe not wait for that kind of event, which actually could be very detrimental if the health aspect falls off a lot, and making that decision now where they can see the road ahead is going to lead to them losing their well-being in that sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I guess a few different points that you raised there. So I've been very driven in my career, and I've, quite often been quite successful in the roles that I've done, and commanded a bigger salary and a bigger bonus, and all of those things in equity within companies. And I'm very grateful for that, and I'm very thankful and very lucky and fortunate, and all of those things. I think the lesson around the don't sacrifice your health for wealth is, it really just isn't worth it. I've got a relatively traditional relationship with my wife, who's been incredibly supportive, throughout this long period of time. And relationships deteriorate, and it definitely had an impact. Relationships deteriorating, with my wife, with my friends, with my children. You can end up spending too much time working in order to solve other people's company challenges and problems that you're facing. It takes a toll on your well-being, your personal physical health, but also I think the biggest one for me was my mental health. I was finding that my mental health was deteriorating, and everything else around me was starting to kind of disintegrate and fall apart as well. And it just is not worth it. It really is just not worth it. And if anybody can pause and take a second and actually prep to make sure that their mental health and stability is really strong before going into some of these bigger, more challenging roles, it's a really valuable exercise to do. And I would say don't rush into those big roles, because when you get there, they are quite high pressure, high stress, especially if there's lots of conflicts within board dynamics, investors, team, multiple countries, markets, time zones, all of those things. It can take its toll. And for me, my children didn't get the best from me, and I'll never be able to get that time back. Lizzie, my wife, didn't get the best from me. My friends and family didn't get the best from me. And it just was a really unhappy, unhealthy, period of time at times. And I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I really, really wouldn't wish it on anyone. And, I've gone through lots of therapy. I've gone through lots of podcasts, lots of learning. I typically dove into it and I was like, I'm not going to run away from this. I'm actually going to go and take this head on now and learn more about myself. So I've learned more about myself now than I think I ever know. I've realised that I'm, very flawed as a character, but I can, the kind of the imperfections that I have, I can manage and control within my behaviours and reactions and actions that I take. And, hopefully I can rebuild, some of the mistakes that I've made and, make sure that those relationships rebuilt in a healthy way going forwards, because at times they just haven't been. And, with myself. And I think for me, if you haven't got a really good relationship with yourself and you're not your own best friend and you don't look after yourself, the reality is you can fall over. And I was very close to falling over at points. And if I fell over, my family were totally dependent upon me. And it just wasn't an option to fall over. And I think probably if it was an option, there would have been points where I think I would have fallen over totally. And there's no point in having a full breakdown. There's no point in losing your health and your well-being in order to get a bigger paycheck coming through. It just really isn't worth it. And I can't express how important it is for those people that want to progress their careers. Just make sure you've got the mental health and wellbeing toolkit as part of all of the other toolkits that you've got, the formal training, the coaching, the leadership principles, the great team that you've built around you and support networks. But just, that toolkit, I think, can quite often be forgotten. And I think it's a really important toolkit for any leader, future leader, to make sure they've got in the bank as well.
I agree. And let's link that to what I find is very common amongst leaders with your type of background and maybe people listening to this. So when we have that independence from a very young age and we have that natural ability to lead, and there's therefore this combination with high performance well, and then expectations rise in terms of winning and being the best in that sense from all sorts of perspectives, I think sometimes it can take longer for some leaders with that kind of background to ask for help and support. What comes to your mind in terms of techniques or coping strategies, or the point at which those kinds of leaders ask for help? Because we can sometimes go too long thinking, we're resourceful, we can do this. Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, I spoke a little bit earlier about kind of understanding yourself and your who you are as an individual. The other thing is those people around you really know you, your closest friends, your family, your loved ones, your colleagues, they can see changes in you as well. So when you get that feedback and your people are talking, to you and they're worrying about you, don't ignore some of those cues. Actually take on board some of that feedback and then look at, what are some of the systems that you can put in place in order to make sure that you've got the right support around you. And actually you're looking after yourself as well, first and foremost. And for me, there were times where I ignored some of those cues for sure. Working late nights, early mornings, all day, every day, spending too much time on calls, family being like, are you okay? I'm not sure you're okay. And you're like, totally fine. I'm just going to plow on. We're all good, and you realise quite quickly when you reflect and look back on time, actually, you're probably a completely different individual to what you thought you were. So, and I caught it not too late, which is great, because I didn't fall over, I didn't have a breakdown or anything like that. But I think that if it would have continued going on and I hadn't caught it, I think I could have, it could have actually got quite bad. And there are lots of people out there that go through that. And I think it's just really important to make sure you're learning, you train your body, you need to train your brain as well. And if you can train your brain, and have that toolkit in place in order to look after yourself, it's just so important. And for me, like I say, I relied a lot on podcasts. I did a lot of reading online. I spoke to close friends about the kind of warts and all of everything that was going on, very openly, very honestly, with transparency. Some of that I felt shameful about, some of that I felt quite embarrassed about, but and some of it, I've really learned some tough lessons on, for not being, not necessarily always sticking to my own values and morals. And I'm very fortunate that the network around me and some of the support systems that I put in place picked me back up and kind of rebuilt and helped me rebuild to become a different person through, who I am as a person, and then actually some of the leadership principles that I put in place. And I'm very fortunate. I've got some incredible people around me, and they know who they are, and I will forever be thankful for them as well. But just look after yourself. Like, it really just is not worth it, And I can't emphasize that enough. And it's just such an important point. And there's a stigmatism attached to it as well, and there will continue to be for a while. But talking to people that you can trust and getting support from businesses, colleagues, friends, family, go and start those initial discussions, because those are hard discussions to start. But I can almost guarantee you 99% of the time people will open you with open arms and go, thank goodness you've actually recognised this in yourself, and here we go, let's try and help you as we progress and go forwards. So those initial discussions are tough. The bit that follows, it can get worse at times, and it's a bit of a roller coaster, but what I can guarantee is when you rebuild and grow, you come back far fitter, stronger and healthier than you ever imagined as well.
I agree, and I remember working with a leader once who, similar background to you actually, it was rugby, but high performance background in terms of international rugby. And it was interesting when we were working together, he wanted to work on his mental well-being, but actually he felt guilty in a way that he was taking time out for himself to create space for either mindfulness or walking, etc., because everyone else was doing in terms of his team and everyone else. And yet it was that guilt there. And it took him a long time to recognize that he was in service of everybody else because he was taking the space and time. And that was his role as the leader. I don't know if you can relate to that and how you managed to cope with that.
Totally, yeah. It's funny, if you say you want something done, generally you give it to someone who's quite busy, and they quite often get it done, right? And one of the best things, and I was that individual. One of the best things that actually ever happened to me, other than children, family, so on and so forth. Actually, we got a dog, and I was like, no way, I haven't got time for a dog. And I tell you what, it's the best time of day for me. Like, I take the dog for a walk in the morning, I take the dog for a walk in the evening, and it's not long, it's a small window, it's a space of time where you're doing something for yourself with some fresh air, it's physical. You can have some space for your own brain to think either creatively and problem solve, or work through challenges or solutions that you're facing, or, talk to friends, family, whatever it might be. But having that space and time is just so important. So I understand the guilt that can be created, and that's just one very small example. And I've definitely had people close to me being like, you're not being quite selfish in some of your actions and behaviours with what you're doing. But I think sometimes you have to be. You have to do that to make sure you're okay, especially when you've got people that are so dependent upon you. Because if you fall over, you can't support those people that are around you as well. So taking the time and recognising that is just so critical in order to make sure your own well-being is okay. And for me, honestly, it was as simple as getting a dog, which I didn't think I had enough time for, and it was one of the best things that ever happened. So it doesn't need to be a big thing. It can be a very small thing, and it can make a world of difference, for sure.
I agree with you, and there's a couple of things that come to mind there. I also got a dog, so mine's called Ollie. He's coming up to 6 now, a little cavapoo, but you're absolutely right. He's present all the time. And that really taught me as I was walking with him that actually that really is good for me to have something that's present with me to be able to create that space. And you can also translate that to then another person that's around you who, rather than just talks at you all the time and shares their problems, and sometimes it can be a drain, having someone who's just present with you to give space for both of you, I think, again, can achieve the same thing. So thank you for sharing that. We're coming towards the end of our time together, Ben. Time's flown here, but I do want to know what the future has in store for you. So bear in mind the journey you've been on and being close to that precipice and learning through that event, and you now know what's important to you. What's left for you in terms of the next maybe 5 to 10 years? What are you going to be particularly in service of in terms of your life?
I guess in terms of life, prioritizing what's important to me, first and foremost, and probably outside of work. I've got 3 amazing children, a fantastic family, got some amazing friends. It's a reprioritising some of those things to make sure that I'm the best version of myself, but the best version for those people around me. It's really important. I think from a career perspective, I'm really enjoying where I am right now. I love my job. I love my role. I love the business, that I'm in. I'm very aware it won't last forever. I'm in these roles now that, typically at that level, they'll last somewhere between 3 to 5 years, and there's some form of change that will come with it as well. But I would like to stick with this for as long as I can. And I've really enjoyed the non-exec work that I do, the board advisory work, the added consultancy, the being more entrepreneurial and setting up my own, business brands, those types of things. So I would imagine as time progresses now, I'll find a balance in there around career and kind of personal circumstances, but doing more of the career stuff that I really enjoy and want to do, with a risk profile appetite that I'm happy to, but without it causing too much of a detriment to my personal circumstances as well. So that may be more of creating my own brand, for example, at some stage, or business. It could be actually transitioning out of significant leadership roles into actually more advisory roles and helping other leaders then grow and build, their careers because of the experience that I've got. It could be actually continuing in leadership roles, but actually making sure that I've got other interests that I'm working on at the same time as well. So I'm excited to see where it goes, for sure. I feel like I've done a lot in quite a short period of time in a career, and it's been quite rapid. So I'm certainly not in a rush to go through a whole heap of change over the next few years. I'd like it to be quite stable, quite calm, quite balanced and considered, continuing to enjoying my role that I'm doing right now and continuing to add value, where I can with the businesses that I work with and within the role that I do as well. So I always talk a lot to my team about, as you progress, there's a little bit of like right place, right time, be really good at what you do, make sure you're delivering the results, focus on what you're good at. And I'm just trying to kind of refocus, take my own advice and work through that, and opportunities will arise. I think that's the beauty of it. You every day you get a new start, every day you get a new chance, and, more opportunities will come from that as well. So just a bit more balanced, I think, and considered over the next few years, and then maybe hit the accelerate button a bit more again at some stage. But for now, I'm quite pleased and content with where I'm at too.
Super, thank you for that. I've got one question that's come to me just to finish off our podcast with, and it goes back to where we started this conversation. So if you had the ability now to go back in time to 10-year-old Ben, becomes captain of the team and has got this drive and independence and performance-driven mentality from that young age to step into the fray, what piece of advice would you give to him so that as he was growing up, it felt okay to be like that and not to worry because everything actually is going to turn out okay? What kind of advice would you give to him?
I would say follow your dreams, and ambitions, relentlessly, and chase them, with passion and enthusiasm. It will all be okay. There's going to be some stormy seas. There's going to be some calm seas, some calm days. There's going to be a real mixture of what you're going to face as you go forwards. But you're going to be okay, and you've got some fantastic people around you to support you through all of those hardships, but also some of the great times. And actually, some of the hardships that you face make you appreciate the good times even more. So, and it will all be okay. It all works out in the end, because it always does. And you build, you grow, you develop, you learn, you come back stronger. And if you have the right attitude with that, you'll continue to progress and grow as an individual. And I think that then flows through into many other aspects of life. So be confident and enjoy the journey. I think I would say to that 10-year-old Ben, if I had that time and opportunity to do so.
Lovely. What I love about your message there and where it comes from is that unconditional love, which I think many of us can actually display a lot more to ourselves, more of the time. So on that note, I think we're going to finish. Ben, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think all our listeners and the people that are watching this on YouTube would have gained something in resonance in terms of where they've come from and where they are right now. And I really appreciate the vulnerability that you've shown today. Thanks very much for being on the show.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. And I hope everyone enjoys it and gets the opportunity to learn from it as well. So thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favourite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.